Joe Mullings, Holly Scott, and Matt Kaufman live. Well, sort of live from 160 Studios. It's been a year since we sat down and did a update of what's happening in 2022. It's good to be back together.
Yes, it is. It's flown. What a year.
Yeah, it's been a blast.
It's been quite a change for us in just the last 365 days. Let's just leave the pandemic aside. The dramatic changes in our organization and the additions to the market. What catches your brain and your mind first on that, Hal?
Well, the continued investment, the continued growth in technology, sciences, products, services that are evolving the patient/consumer to higher ground continues to drive us every day, right? And with that, the market has continued to feed that. So we're continuing to see enormous opportunity and a fertile ground for anyone, whether it's a company that we're participating in building or individuals that we're working with on their career development. So it's been a great year. I love the fact that we have, even prior to this year, been staying ahead with so many of your visions that we might have taken a little bit longer to see, but now understand in terms of the reality and what it can mean to the market. So it's been a great year, and I'm excited to see what's coming next too.
Matt, what would you linchpin for the last 12 months?
I think there's a certain, and it's hard to imagine us getting deeper, but I think there's a deepening of our relationships and our partnerships with both sides of the relationship, which is, the folks that are looking to build their corporations and folks who are looking for their next opportunity. And through all the things that we've been doing, whether it's the branding and the video and the interviews and all the things that we've all been doing on making us more visible, but what it's always been doing is helping serve the market and pushing the technology and pushing medical devices and medtech across the globe. But I think what it has happened more than anything else is we become an extension of the people we work with. It's literally like we're working together as opposed to working for them. It's more of a working with them. And think about all the repeat business that we have. I mean, how many times we work with the same person to help them find a new job, and how many times we work with the same company to hire more people. I mean, that's a testimony to us. But more than anything else, it's a testament to the way that the market is growing and how busy that we've been.
And I agree with both of you, Holly, the convergence of technology and medtech now sliding over to the consumer side. So the consumerization of medtech, entering into the household, entering into the changing centers of care, whether it's the household, ambulatory surgical centers, and some of that was the jettison from the pandemic of the perception of it not being safe in a hospital, but now heal thyself and then do no harm at the same time at home or the changing centers of care. And Matt, I'm with you too. One of the things that I'm proud of is that between the three of us, let's see, 32, 25, and 20, I can't do math real quick, but that's something like 97 years of experience in health tech, med tech, recruiting, sitting on this floor. I'm proud of that. But we were the first firm to introduce video to LinkedIn, first search firm. We're the only search firm in the world that has a production studio, a marketing division, and a media division. And it's not about us though. Matt, as you pointed out, what we have done is recruiting is still a primary initiative, but how we deliver that now is telling the stories about these emerging tech companies and building an awareness around these emerging markets, around these emerging products and or services. And then those companies get bought by the big strategics, because the big strategics aren't changing medtech. They are purchasing the people who are changing medtech. And we're building those companies. And then after they get their reward for doing that, they go out and they do it again. And to your point, they call us again. And to me, real building a company is telling the story out loud so the market can hear it, and individuals who have the courage can look up and go, I've been watching Matt's videos, I've been watching Holly's videos, Joe's videos, and soon Devin and Wes as well. And I never knew that before. And now that I'm looking, I want to check that out. I think that's how we've rewritten the talent access world and impacted the world of work in that area.
I think much of it is we're building it together with these individuals. We don't take their information and spin it and turn it out the way we view it. relationship that's built on them explaining, okay, this is what I want to say, and us helping them craft that in such a way that it's compelling, and then we're able to paint such a picture for people to become interested, as you say, lean in. And I think it comes from being on the same page. It's not a transaction to us. It never has been. It's always been, okay, how are we going to help you get where you want to go? Here's what we can do to provide that. And it's a creative side of us that I've never seen any other search firm do it, where we're able to do almost anything we want to boost their signal and to amplify what they're trying to get across. We're acting as a megaphone for these companies, which has been the most fun over the last year. I think more than anything else that we've been all doing is we've been loud, and it's been great. And I've never seen anything like it, so I can't imagine what it would be like in the future past this, because I really couldn't imagine this. And now it's already here. I'm like, okay, where are we going from here?
Holly, the additions we've had this year, and I know you're especially close to, again, you know, you are the mama bear of this entire clan. So you have had a big impact on the new facilities we opened as well and the talent there.
That has been such a gift in terms of realization from the pandemic, how effectively we can work regardless of where we are sitting, and the magnitude of the relationships that can be developed. It's opened up opportunities for us in several locations to tap talent on the shoulder and have true partners, you know, globally, and that's been, and it is two-way. They were individually looking for the right type of employer that no longer had to be geographically specific, and that has been amazing. We've seen it not only on our own team, but also in the industry. It's opened up so much opportunity overall.
And we've opened up the UK, a physical location in the UK this year, where we've got a great team there who are very rapidly impacting careers and companies in medtech. We've opened up Cleveland, where we've got a seed there and growing very, very quickly, which is genesis of our life science practice and biotech practice as well. We signed a lease in Canada, and we should be building out our Canadian initiative on the West Coast as well. And as we discussed the other day, we started our partnering program, where now we're going to be looking at people who are in search right now, who have a one-desk, two-desk office, and want to say, hold on, wait a second. I want to be TMGized. I want marketing, I want media, I want back-end search operations. I want somebody to help me with my talent, develop my talent, hire, train on the way that you guys impact sort of the world of work today. So that's all exciting for me. So we talked about the changes that we've been reading the market and then developing products and processes on behalf of the individuals and the companies and how we can help them. What has changed in the world of work, Matt, in the last 12 months? If I'm an individual specifically looking for a job, what should I be aware of beyond the headlines right now? And if I'm a company looking to attract talent, what should I be thinking about in the new world of work?
The word of the year has been flexibility. It's just the open-mindedness of what was doesn't have to be what is. And I think there's always going to be a small percentage of the population who unfortunately are going to go back to what they've done. But the vast majority of individuals and corporations that we work with have all come to the conclusion it's fine to work remotely. It's fine to travel again. It's fine to have a different structure of the way you manage a team. It doesn't have to all be in the same room. FaceTime is a thing of the past. And I think that both sides have agreed on this, which is the most important piece, because if one side feels and the other one doesn't, you know what you get. You get nothing but conflict. You don't get any kind of resolution. And with that, it's changed the way the searches are done, because when you work around the world, it doesn't matter where you find them. The interview process is just as smooth. People have found that they don't have to shake hands. They can do it over Zoom and still get to know someone. Companies have found a way to feel comfortable enough with their process that they're able to actually spend $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 on somebody and hire them. By the same token, the individuals are feeling comfortable enough to say, I've learned enough about you and your culture that I can accept an opportunity without physically coming to your office. And so that to me has been the biggest change, because if you think about it, over the 20 years we've all been doing this, when did we ever think it would be okay for them not to be in the same room and still hire an executive? And now it's every day.
Yeah, it's fascinating. In 2020, And in 2021, 68% of my placements personally were all via video conference, right? I will say though, I'm seeing an interesting rumble in the market, especially the last 2 weeks, talking real time. And I would encourage this individual who might be actively looking to think about what others are not willing to do. So there is some drive to go back to office. There is some drive to go to trade shows, to travel, to build a team, to do those things that frankly take a bit of bravery and a bit of outside of the norm thinking, because none of us really know where things are going to settle out. So is it better to be dragged behind with the trend, or is it better to be in front of it and be ahead of what could be and be seen as someone who's driving that change? And I would encourage individuals to start having those conversations, especially at home, because I'm seeing now that the expectations are shifting a bit, that there's some serious family scenarios that are bubbling up that may be very supportive and may not be. And if it were me in this situation, I would want to stay ahead of that, and I would want to start thinking deeply about what my career means for the household and what is going to define that. What activities, what actions, how am I going to be front and center when things get to where they really do look for the person who's the tip of the spear.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting, both of you hit on something very important and very dynamic in the workplace. I'm forecasting here that on LinkedIn, you know where you have that little, where it says open to network? Mm-hmm. I think you're gonna have open to come into the office. No, you may laugh at that.
Yeah, but it's interesting.
But I do know that I've got searches going on where that the client is saying, okay, Sally is not willing to come into the office, Bertha is, and that has become a pro and con on the checklist going down. So I believe you're going to have open to come into the office as one. Right. And it's funny that we're saying that. Mm-hmm. And then second, the outfitting of what the home looks like moving forward is going to also have an impact, because that impacts lifestyle.
Right.
It's easy for us who are in a position to own a 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 square foot home and have a sequestered office on the side. But just think about the individuals who don't, who are just starting out their careers and maybe living in a one-bedroom apartment, and they have a sig other or child. Mm-hmm. So that entire dynamic is still working its way out in the marketplace, and I still think you're right, Matt. We've got a little bit of an opaque picture, but I don't know anybody has any certainty at all. And within the corporate environment, I pity HR, who has to figure out that dynamic and then go into the executive suite every 6 months and say, it's changed, it's changed, it's changed. And then I applaud the executive leadership that's going to go, we expected that, let's move, we expected that. And what's going to be an issue there is the people who signed up 12 months ago for the gig they're in, on what the new gig's going to be 18 months from now, how do you manage that parity in-house when somebody who signed up for being 100% remote, now it's changing. So that tension in the marketplace is going to be really interesting to watch.
It's going to be very interesting. And I think it starts with something that we've all talked about, going deeply on sharpening your craft, right? And if your craft is, let's just use software engineering, right? If you're a software engineer, how much of your craft being sharpened really relies on the interaction, or it relies on the trade shows, or relies on, right? And then there's the chief commercialization officer, who is at the other extreme with their reliance on engagement, relationships, key opinion leaders, you know, all of those pieces. So it's going to be very interesting. But the software engineer who considers the hybrid, the flexible situation, goes into the office, may have an advantage over the one that absolutely refuses in the future. Right now, up until in this last year, we have said to many clients, I can't guarantee you that you're going to have someone in office for many positions, and your talent pool, if you insist on it, is dramatically less. That may continue for a while, but if I'm speaking to the individual rather than the company, we need to go after where the talent is. And if I'm speaking to the individual, I would encourage that individual to think about where are they going to sharpen their craft? Where are they going to get even better than they were 12 months ago, 12 days ago, and continue on those lessons.
What message would you give to the individuals in the market, Matt, so as you coach people at all levels, junior levels and even executive levels. What do you see the dynamic being, and you give them advice over it as far as we can see the next 12 months?
Well, the first thing I always tell everybody, whether they're 22 or 72, is to be responsive. So many times they get opportunities, whether it's from folks like us or people that they've known from the past, former workmates, bosses, what have you, and they don't return the call. They don't follow up on the email. They don't take the meeting. I have an executive, a COO that I'm real close with, and he has a mantra. He takes every meeting. No matter what, a cup of coffee, a bran muffin, whatever, he goes and he hears them out. Because it's usually not that meeting that turns into something. It's something 4 months down the road, 8 months down the road. It's a relationship. You get a board seat out of that meeting 8 months later. And so that's the first thing that I would say is just listen. You know what, the analogy I always give is you go to a restaurant and the waiter or the waitress comes up to you and says, hey, would you like to hear today's specials? And it's just saying no. I don't want any extra. I just want to know what's on the menu. Like, why wouldn't you want to hear what else is available? And if you're not interested, you say politely, no thank you, and you move on. But at least now you've made some form of a connection and relationship for future conversations. The other thing that I would suggest is for those of you who've been at large corporations your whole career or startups your whole career, it doesn't mean you have to stay on that track. There are plenty of people who make that transition on a regular basis. There's a first time for every jump. Every CEO who worked at a multinational conglomerate took their first leap. And every person who's at a 4-person startup 3 times in a row did take a jump to a 40,000 person corporation. It's okay. It's okay to take that first jump. Don't say, well, I'm a startup person or I'm a big company person. No, you're not. You're just a person. And I would wait and get all the information first before you label yourself.
That's interesting because I do think scenario dictates. It's what are you looking for? And if you really can define what you're looking for, I believe you can probably find that in a small, medium, and large company.
But that's the question is, do you know what you're looking for?
That's the real question.
And I would think the average person does not. They may think they do because it's what's comfortable or what they know or what their mom told them or what have you, but the truth of it is, 20 years ago, I didn't know I was going to be working here. This is not what I, quote unquote, was looking for. And then I met you guys and I was. But before, if I wouldn't have taken this meeting, you know, it really comes down to that. That's why I think those relationships and those conversations are where it starts, and it comes from being open.
Holly, so you're going to design, I'll use this label for our audience. You're going to design an HR department. You're building a company. You're going to design an HR department that really is meant to build a talent for the company. And we've had the discussion that just should be 2 different categories. What would that new HR department that is focused on bringing in talent, what would it look like and what would it be really good at?
So this is my dream company,
This
right?
is your dream company. You're sitting as a CEO of Holly's kick butt stuff.
Again. So the first piece that jumps to mind is we have to create awareness and attention about who we are and why we're wonderful and why our stuff is the best in the world, right? And in this market, if I'm the CEO of a company, I have to recognize that every person has an option to either pay attention or not to whatever content is out there, whether it's something that they hear or something that they see. So we have to create a positive experience for anyone who comes into or engaging with anything that we put out in the public domain. And we can't get away from media. We are in a media-rich world. Infants are, as well as our grandparents. This is the world that we're in. And if we want to have a business, we have to have awareness and attention. So that's going to come from great brand awareness, and that's going to come from a team that is outwardly focused. HR in the context of human resources is there to keep us out of trouble and keep us legally in the right place at the right time. If we're talking about really creating talent acquisition, talent access, that's a much bigger outwardly facing activity.
And that's an invasive procedure that is built around customer experience because that individual is a customer and you need to be selling really hard there. How do we transition them through the entire customer experience and getting that mindset, customer experience, not ghosting them, giving them timely info back. Because the person who's most important in any interview process in my opinion, is the person who didn't get hired. Because they then become the messenger to the market of, that was a terrible experience, I would never go back there again. Or maybe you didn't get picked. And you say, you know what? I have a really good friend that needs to know about this opportunity or this company. So that's where I think a lot of organizations miss the mark. Understanding that they interviewed 17 people for one role. The person who got hired is the least important right now, facing to the market. The other 16 are carrying what they experienced through that process. Matt, what would you put on top of the shoulders of what Holly talked about?
So I'm a bit of a college sports fan, and every coach will tell you the same thing in their southern drawl is always be recruiting. They recruit 24/7. That is all they do. And it comes from everything from gear of like the clothes and the shoes and things they wear. They send handwritten notes to the parents. They do things that are just one more step above this interest in connecting with you and understanding what's important to you. And I think that's what is the major thing that you're saying as far as the experience goes, is it has to be constant and it has to be consistent. And that includes us. We are an extension of the company. If I'm saying the opposite of what the branding is at XYZ company, they're going to come in an interview and it's a full stop in the middle of the conversation saying, that's not what Matt said. Matt said they're this, and this. And the person behind the desk who actually has the job description in their hand is saying it's the opposite. And so there needs to be this consistent message. I ask them, I go, tell me your words. What are the words you use? And that's the words that I use. And I think that's the biggest thing is this perpetual recruiting mentality of always looking for talent, but not in a direct way. I think similar to the way we've been doing it for the market is the way that I would do it if I was at a company. I would just constantly just let them know this is what our company does. This is what our product does. This is what our culture does. And this is the results. And have people who work there be on podcasts and get interviewed and tell them what a great experience they're having and all the impact that they're having and some of their charity work that they're doing and all the things that build out the infrastructure of what it's like day to day to come work here. And I think sometimes that's enough for people to passively or proactively, even better, come forward and say, I want to work there. How do I work there? I heard that they're doing something amazing for the Special Olympics. I love the Special Olympics. I would do anything to be a part of that. And the XYZ company does that. I think that's the key. I think the key is a constant, consistent communication of who we are and what we do. And usually that's going to get you where you want to go as far, instead of the direct recruiting, picking up the phone, hey, you want to work for us? You want to work for us? I don't think that's the answer anymore.
Yeah, and I'm going to build on what you both had just shared. Here's what I would do in addition to. I would say, okay, I'm going to identify the top 20 individuals in the marketplace in either analogous companies to mine or maybe totally different mindset to mine. I'm going to go identify the top 20 finance people, top 20 engineers, top 20 product managers, top 20 HR people, top 20, and I'm going to reach out to them on this thing called LinkedIn, which is the best sort of educational platform, not recruiting platform, but educational platform in the world. And I will keep those 240 names in my hot box. And every time I get an opportunity to interview somebody who works here, I'm going to make sure it gets in-mailed to them. Every time we have a press release, I'm going to make sure it gets in-mailed to those people. Every time I find an article that talks about the market that I'm in, maybe not even the product that we make that serves that market, that shows the future of that market, I'm going to send it to them. So, and then I'm going to have somebody who's going to automatically do that for me as a full-time job. Because if I can bring in what I call lightning rod hires or force multipliers, I've talked about this before. There's something called Price's Law. Price's Law takes the number of people that are in your company, take the square root of that, and those people do 50% of the work. So if I have a 40-person company, that means about 6 people do 50% of the work in my organization. If I can make it a habit in a normal distribution curve. So if you know Price's Law, and then you can go after force multipliers, and you could start taking that number from the norm of 6 to 14, that is going to jump your performance. So a full-time job in an organization should be recruiting 24/7, but passively recruiting, because A players are never sending their resumes into postings. But what they're doing is responding to what is in their eyes, attention and awareness, and then the hiring manager, the VP of X or the C-level of X is constantly sending a message out and sending that bat signal out. Now what you've got is you've got people who can passively lean in, and either they've done their work already at their current employer, or they had a bad day or week or month, and they're like, you know what? It's time for me to look. It's time for me to look. It's time for me to grow. I've done everything I can here. And you will be in the top 5 that they reach out to. I think those are the 3 things. If I was going to do a talent access function at an organization, it would include all of those.
One other point that comes from that, which is similar to what we're all saying, is the conversation that happens from that. Someone grabs a beer that night that they got their 4th email from that company or that person. Say, man, did you see XYZ company keeps sending me stuff? Are you getting stuff too? And the person may say yes or no, but it prompts a conversation. So it may not be that individual.
That's right.
But we've been saying this for 20-something years, that birds of a feather flock together. And if you're an A player, the odds are you hang with other A players. It's usually just your personality. So even so, it becomes almost like they're saying our message for the company or for us by saying it's them. So they may not be the person, but they may get us the person. So there's even more to it than just reaching out to them directly. You never know where it leads.
That's true. And that's why we built, as we wrap this up, that's why we built the position brief, right? So no other search firm has these. We built a multimedia experience on behalf of our clients. So when we call Fred Jones, because Fred Jones has a relationship, and we send that position brief, which is a ton of content covering product, market, leadership, and mission that we tell the story around in that multimedia packet that goes out. When he gets it and he's like, not for me, but oh my gosh, that conversation, that digital conversation then gets passed off. You get a call from somebody that you didn't reach out to, but they got that from somebody else because they were like, did you see what they're doing? Now you have somebody. So that is really what we've used that in a technological and digital product in order to reach the market. So, well, it's been a heck of a first year since the last time we set, with lots changing, so more to come.
Yeah, it's amazing to see, if I think about where we started in search, and I know the running joke is I dealt with faxes, but you dealt with the old
Mailed in
school
resumes.
mailed in rolling and the paper and the fax machine that was before my time. But now the business of search has evolved where that's a spoke of what we do. You know, if we're building companies, and by way of building companies that serve the market, building careers, search is one area. And the way we search is entirely different than it used to be, although it still comes down to phone calls and relationships and finding out what's important. The entire talent access and talent acquisition process for a client involves so many more subtleties. So when the client, like say mid-cap or big company, calls and they say, gosh, this position is so hard to fill, I got to hire you, Joe, I got to hire you, Matt. We step back and we're really looking at the big picture and the challenge that we're looking to solve. This is a reason, there's one spoke on it, we need, yes, a human to fill the position, but how and why and where and what is this person going to become in the next few years from being part of this effort? So there's so much more that goes into it, and it's evolved to a level that I'm impressed every day.
Well, you know, we bring up that, you bring up the phone. The phone still is our lifeblood, but what we've done, and we're pretty much the only firm that's done this, and I say that we're the only firm that's done this, and we do it on behalf of the companies and the people building careers, is the phone is still the linchpin in making the relationship. But what we've done is we've moved the phone further down the equation. We've built up this attention awareness, this employer branding, answering the story or telling the story of who will you become if you enter that market, who will you become if you enter that company in that market. And so we build out this longitudinal story that then has people go, and our brands as well, our expertise in spreading our subject matter expertise online. So when you do pick up the phone, they're like, Matt, I've been watching you. Holly, I've been watching you. I've been watching that special on Abiomed, or I've been watching that special on Ascensus, or Active, right? And yeah, I'm glad you called me. And you can jump right into the dialogue, and you already have the gravitas, you already have the subject matter credibility, and then your client and or that market does. So that phone call still is the number one thing, but we don't have to spend the first 5 minutes convincing you that I'm the person who knows best for your career, and or my client actually has a product that's relevant in the market.
And what else helps with that is LinkedIn. It's the Kevin Bacon game. So majority of the people, before they speak to us, and I think they do this surreptitiously, is they check to see who are our mutual connections. And if they're people that they respect, which majority of the time they are, they wouldn't be their connections, and they see that we have 400 of their closest friends, we're already 3 steps ahead. Like, how you know so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so? I'm like, yeah, I've known them for 17 years. Just happened to me the other day. President of a company called me and he's like, you know all these people? I'm like, well, I've been doing this a long time. I'd love to say it's talent. It's more just longevity, probably more than anything else. And so it's interesting how that happens also. We gain a fair amount of credibility, not just by the content we put out, but by the people that we know and those people vouching for us. Because I think familiarity trumps almost everything else. And if you call your close friend and they say, hey, you should work with Mullings Group, that's usually enough. I mean, I've gotten multiple calls, which I know you guys have too, where so-and-so told me to call. Just happened to me yesterday. So-and-so said I should call you. Well, great. There's a reason why they said that. It's not an accident. It can't happen 1,000 times and it be an accident.
It's true.
So we're doing something right.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So a question, sort of a couple questions bundled together. We get the question a lot is, you know, we've had over 30% year-over-year growth for the last 7 years. People are amazed when they call us and say, well, how was 2020 for you? How was 2021? How was 2022? And then we've knocked the cover off the ball. And you know, why do you think that is? So that's the first. And then does that change if I'm in that 21 to 20, or I'm in that 2 to 8 year career, or I'm in that 20 to 30 year career? So I know you and I talk about this a lot in the lunchroom, is like, how the hell is this market so good with all the zaniness going on?
Look, it's counterintuitive to anything that you would think of with what's going on in the world. And the good part is it's not just us. The other search firms are doing well. The market is doing well as a whole. If we were the only ones doing well, I'd be concerned, because how long can one firm sustain it? But the fact that it seems to be a unanimous portion to what it is, which means that the market's strong, which means that it's not tenuous. I think it's because, believe it or not, this is just my estimation, I've given this a ton of thought, is I think the one good thing that COVID has done is it's brought a light to the way healthcare can be positive and people can come together. And what that's done is brought in investment, and that's brought in activity. And if you remember in the very beginning when this went sideways, the larger companies pulled in their horns. They didn't hire. They shut down all of their recs. They shut down everything. The small to mid-sized companies, which is where we're the most comfortable and certainly the strongest, they saw it as an opportunity. And before you knew it, the multinational corporations were like, we're losing talent. And all of a sudden they flipped their switch right back on. And because of that, momentum has not slowed down for 2-3 years. We've seen stronger growth than I've seen in 20 years. Never seen anything like it. And that includes salaries and opportunities and titles and all kinds of different things. And I think it's because there's been a positive association with healthcare. And as weird as it sounds, I think COVID had something to do with that, because everyone pulled together with the vaccines and with everything that needed to be done. And I think because of that, the investment followed, and that's where the activity comes from. As it relates to the number of years of experience, yeah, it's always a matter of perspective. If you're buying your first home, where do you buy it? If you're living in a place that's so ridiculously expensive, can we stay here and build a family? Hashtag Bay Area. You have to consider, well, what are my short-term and long-term goals? Whereas if you're 25, 30 years in, your long-term goals really aren't a part of the equation anymore. It's now, well, what would I like to do for either my last ride into the sunset, or to finish out my career, or I'd like to take a turn. I've been doing orthopedics all my life, and as much as I love it, I would love to do something else. My brother has diabetes. This is what I want to do. So I think you become a bit more specific further into your career, and you start to choose on what lights you up. Like for me, it's stroke. I have a certain personal and professional passion for stroke. I work with multiple stroke companies. I feel like it is the one undiscovered country that we just cannot fix. And it bothers me. And that's why whenever a stroke company calls or any neuro company calls, I say yes to whatever the search is. It doesn't matter to me. And I think that that's ideal for people who are further along in your career. But if you're 3 to 8 years, at that point, I don't think limiting yourself is the way to go. I think being open to any kind of conversation, because there's so much you don't know. And you're going to find out in conversation, you're going to say, you can do that? Because I say that every day. with different technologies. So I think be very deliberate later in your career, but early on in your career, be very open-minded, because there's so many opportunities out there and technologies you probably never thought you'd be interested in. Meanwhile, turn into something that changed your life.
Hal?
Yeah, so the market itself in the last couple of years, one thing rings in my head every single day. It's stay on top of where the market's going to support the trends and what's needed, and also what market cares about. Okay, I had a really interesting discussion that just stayed in my head for this entire time with an investment banker turned CFO, and his words of advice were, I always look at any potential investment as what the market looks like, what is the potential there, but also who cares? Who cares? And not just, you or I, in general, who cares about this market so much that they're going to rally around it, that they're going to go work for companies that do this, that they're going to put time, effort, other resources into it. And right now we are seeing this real time. In the last 2 years, there's been no higher sense of awareness around healthcare and evolving healthcare. This is a pandemic. It affected everyone in that way. So I believe that that's what drove the investment. And again, we do stay on the small side in the innovation and the forward-thinking companies. So when those 2 months that the bigger companies shut down and tried to figure out, what the heck to do, the small companies are scrappy and going after it, and pulling people in that were strong and brave and willing to take on something that was meaningful. So that's been an enormous trend, and I don't expect that trend to stop anytime soon. I'm not seeing signs of that. Is there going to be some kind of economic slowdown? Who knows? Is there going to be, interest rates raised? Are there going to be changes in the search landscape where people are going to pull out? Of course. We've lived through 3 recessions, and there's always a cleansing in the recruiting industry overall. But in terms of healthcare and where we stay, we are playing in building companies that create meaningful opportunities for human beings worldwide. And I just don't see any end in sight for that. It's carried us through. As far as growth and in career and advice for the younger generation, you mentioned a good point earlier, Joe. Mentorship at that level is suffering because there isn't as much face time. There isn't much required duties, and you learn more from being around people than just having something given to you on a computer screen. All parents learned that when their kids were sitting home for a year trying to learn virtually versus going to school. There's different ways to learn. There's different ways to absorb lessons. So I would encourage that generation, that age population, to, again, do things that others are not doing. Ensure that you go deep on the area of interest that you're studying, and be willing to do it for free, volunteer, shadow, raise your hand and say, I want to learn. Listen, we don't owe you a job. The market's good, but you're not owed anything. I hate to sound pedantic, but it's really important to know that the workforce is still a difficult workforce. Yes, we have flexibility. Yes, we're in a high demand set. Yes, you're going to get a lot of interviews, but the people who are going to have the stickiness to grow and learn and be part of the next generation of leaders are the ones who are going to go out of their way to excel in this period. Because right now it's easy to be just part of the world, right? It's just easy to just plug in and get paid. But is that really going to be enough for you 5 years, 10 years down the road?
And I think you're both hit on interesting points around where the market's going and why it's been so healthy. And I think there's a number of reasons. Certainly the pandemic shut down the big corporates. And the corporates had to do that because they have to answer to shareholders, right? So unfortunately, leadership there has to manage to profits. And so if you've shut down the elective market in the healthcare environment where you couldn't go into a hospital anymore, there goes your top line. And so they had to immediately shut down. They also had a liability in managing a disease, right, or a virus. Certainly. So when you're managing 72 sites and 40,000 employees, you don't have as much permission to do things as you do if you're managing 5 to 50 people. So that's number one. Number two is, the smaller companies in that A, B round, even C round, if you were running clinical trials, you did take it on the chin because you couldn't really drive any clinical trials in that environment. However, if you're doing product development and you can do that at a distance remotely, you were able to really double down on that. The other dynamic that changed a lot, and I think this was just association, not causation, was the medtech industry was moving towards a less intense 510K PMA environment, where up until about 5-6 years ago, nearly every single medical device that was moving the needle and changing the trajectory of healthcare had to be approved by the FDA. Now what we're seeing is we're seeing the convergence of digital, telehealth, and those that don't have to go through so-called regulatory approval cycle. And now you've had this outside money coming in. You've got these new investors, as you talked about, who never invested in medtech before because it wasn't a thing. There wasn't a catheter. It wasn't a lap device. But it was a digital solution that impacted the outcome of healthcare and saved money, increased outcomes, and also expanded how far healthcare could touch, i.e. telehealth, advisement, digital advice to a clinician, and then the at-home healthcare now. So all this new investment money came into the category that never existed before, right? Where all of it, you need to have that tribal knowledge to feel like you can get a 4 to 8x return, imagine 8x, on your investment to your LPs. So I think the convergence of that at the right time certainly expanded new products and new markets. I would say probably 20% of our search portfolio and the 140 retainers we're working on probably don't have a regulatory pathway to them, but still are impacting healthcare, which compromises about 19% of our GDP. And also new talents coming in. So we're pulling in software engineers that never touched the medical device before. We're pulling in UI, UX engineers. We're pulling in project managers out of other regulated environments like aviation or military or transportation, right? Where there's an overriding regulatory demagogue that's saying, make sure that you. So I think that's something that has changed a lot on health care in general and expanded the envelope. So it's no longer a zero-sum game on how much talent is in there. Up till about 6 or 7 years ago, you had the zero-sum game of talent, and all they did was, when the music stopped, they switched chairs. So now it's expanded from a career and a product and a company perspective. And then finally, on the talent side, I agree with both of you. If I'm in my first 2 to 8 years, I've changed on this now that I've turned 60, right, recently. I think you should figure out what you don't want to do. There will be a small percentage of the population that's like, I know I want to do this. And by the way, you're wrong if you know that. I know I want to do this. I think what you need to do is you need to go experiment and figure out what you don't want to do. Now, make sure you're not just screwing around. Like, you need to have an agenda on that. Like, I want to be an engineer, I think, and I want to develop products that are going to save people's lives. Go try, go try, go try. Don't dig yourself a trench in the first 5 to 7 years of your career. Try and go in a bunch of shallow trenches. Don't go in the 6-foot trench right away. Go in the 2-foot trench, mess around a little bit. If you're not skipping when you come home from work, 85% of the time you're in the wrong mini trench. And then you should jump trenches. You can take the skills and transfer them over to, right, you have certain skills that you might be able to jump domains. And so do that, and then what you will find after about a 6 to 7 year sampling, I'm pretty sure you will find your passion. And that's when you want to go ahead and drive towards that. So I would do that. The commenting around mentoring and do that in a 2D world is a longer conversation. I'm very concerned about our future leaders. I'm really concerned about what you don't learn in the off moments outside the Zoom world. And on the seniors, I agree with you, Matt. I think if you're 30 years into your career and you're making a decision, it's funny because I thought about 4 individuals in the last month who have moved down to Florida, who had 30+ year careers in medtech, and they came down here because this is where they knew they wanted to settle. And the good thing for them is they had options to work remote. So they put their cheese where they knew they was going to end up for the next 25 years. And I would say, if you're thinking about that, think about where you want to spend the rest of your life. Is it going to be in the foothills of the Rockies? Is it going to be up in the mountains of Colorado? Is it going to be down here in the beautiful shores of Florida? It's funny, a lot of people are moving out of California, hashtag, oops, and then moving to Texas and Florida. live free or die. I think at that point in time, that is a really good way for you to lock and load, get yourself settled, hit your career for that last 5 to 10 years. And then beyond that, you're not done. I just want to finish with this. The consulting world for the 60, 65 plus, 70 plus, if you have value, now start building your consulting brand. If you're a CLIN, you're a reg, an engineer, a project manager, there's no reason why you can't have an extra 100 to 150,000 coming in, working 15 hours a week, staying engaged, leveraging all that, start building that up as well. So that would be my guidance to people who are on the back end of the curve of their career. So listen, this has been a great get together. I don't want to wait a year next time. Shit, the way things are changing right now, it might be a totally different world in 6 months. So we'll revisit that again. But I am thankful and privileged to work with you two guys.
Likewise.
Yes, you are. Oh, sorry.
yeah.
Yes, you too, Jeff.
Thanks, guys. I'm Joe Mullings with Holly Scott, Matt Kaufman from 160 Studios. Be well.